Hello and welcome to a new EU DataViz webinar. These webinars are organized by the Publications Office of the European Union as follow-up to the EU DataViz conference that was held last year. We had the speaker of today, Suzan, speaking at the conference, and today she's going to elaborate a little bit more on how to modernize an annual report with infographics and visualized data. My name is Beatriz Fernandez. I work in the EU Open Data Portal, the central point of access to open data from EU institutions, agencies, and bodies. Suzan is the head of press and public relations at the German Federal Institute for Risk Assessment. 2 years ago, they embarked on the modernization of the annual publication using infographics and clever visualization. Today, she will show with us how the process went and how they addressed some of the key challenges. There will be room for questions at the end of this webinar, so please note down your questions in the chat box and we will address them at the end. The session is being recorded and it will be published on YouTube. Without further ado, Suzan, the floor is yours. I think you have to unmute yourself, Suzan. Hello? Suzan, you are on mute.
Still mute?
Yeah, now it's fine. Now we can hear you.
Perfect, thank you.
Now we can hear you and we can see.
Being mute.
Yes.
I hope you can hear me now. Okay. Yes, it's really a pleasure and also an honor to have the possibility to talk about how we changed our annual report and it became an innovative magazine. And of course, this is just an example how a publication changed dramatically, and maybe this is something helpful for you as well. Of course, every institution is different, has a different communication strategy, different target audiences, and also different messages. And I'm very impressed by the EU Publication Office about your publications and also about the EU DataViz seminar, which I think was really a great conference. And so my presentation is only intended to give some food for thoughts rather than really developing real new concepts and strategies for your presentation. But I'm also interested in exchange. So if you can give us some feedback or how we can also develop our publications, I would be very grateful as well. Okay, so I try to change the slides. Yes, just a short introduction at our institute. We are scientists, so we give scientific advice to politics with regard to chemical, food and product safety, so that the world becomes a safer place for people to live. And we have at the same time also the remit about risk communication. So we want to inform the public about possible risks. And the good news is for us that scientists are still trusted according to a new Eurobarometer in food. And I don't know why this changed already, but it should be fine. That scientists are still trusted, but still science is very complex. It's never finished and it gives no absolute answers, and sometimes it's even uncertain and not easy to understand. This is particularly important as the flow of information increases. You all know this. Our brain is not able to filter out information at a very large scale, and the more information there is, we try to simplify. So this is absolutely human. And we also think in our institution that it's not only about facts, but also about the perception. And so we study risk perception with different methods. And this is our consumer monitor. It is a biannual representative study of the German population. It's a survey. And we ask the following questions. To what extent are you personally concerned or not about the following food safety topics? And respondents in Germany are first and foremost concerned about microplastics, which is interesting because it's really become a topic over time. And according to the latest available knowledge, it is not assumed that plastic particles in food really pose a health risk for humans. Antimicrobial resistance is a topic also among experts. Then people are concerned about plant protection products, for example, glyphosate, about genetic. And sometimes there is a disparity between the attitudes of experts and lay people. And we think this cannot be resolved by just provision or by the provision of information, because we are, as from a psychological point of view, a lot of people, or we also tend to prefer facts that really fit to our values, fit to our emotions or beliefs. And that's why we need to find other strategies to target our audience. And data visualization can help because we can understand information faster. And we can also can communicate emotions. And we also think that a combination of verbal and graphic risk communication can also reduce false estimations and promote risk literate decisions. And how can we do this? Of course, you probably are as well experts in communication, so you know your communication strategy. You can use different channels. We understand the content. I think this is one of the key aspects. If you want to visualize, you need to understand what you are talking about. You also know how the external agencies work, and you know how to evaluate at the end your activities. I assume that you all receive annual reports from public authorities. Most of them arrive in summer, even autumn of the following year. And we also published an annual report with very interesting, even up-to-date content. But if you publish an annual report 2018 on the cover and you receive it 2019, the interest in the content really decreases. Especially my target audience, the media, is not really interested in the topics anymore. So we decided to reduce the annual report to reporting, just data and facts, and published a new scientific magazine. So we created an eye-catching cover to attract attention. So this is one cover. But of course, as a public institution, we still have data and facts, and we call this now also facts and data. This is for politics, for ministries, for institutions. So we still need some kind of tables that are published. But everything that is of interest for the consumers, we just put this out of the annual report, and this is now called our BFR to go. These are our issues so far. So we talk about olive oil, which, by the way, is one of the food that is mostly commonly affected by food fraud. We talk about antibiotic resistance because it was a very high ranked topic with regard to risk perception, and also microplastics, as we saw before. And we talk, for example, also about heat-induced contaminants. So to inform the public about possible health risks which can be involved in this case. So our magazine includes infographics, for example, about the attitude of the population to eat insects. Most of them do not like this, but for example, acceptance can be increased if insects do not look like insects, if they are made unrecognizable in the form of processed food or burgers. And this is just our infographic with regard to the risk perception of insects. So, of course, always there's a danger if you use visualization. It can polarize. We know this from the scientific literature, and can also increase even hate speech. But I think it depends also on the topic and how you really transfer this to the public. So we use drawings to emotionize the topic of tattoo risks, and we also give data when it comes to the risk of energy drinks, which is of concern, especially of of children because of the level of caffeine. For example, you can see here 1 can of energy drinks contains like 80 milligram caffeine, which is more than a cola drink, for example. And we also talk about heat-induced contaminants, but we do not do this like on the left side. So we even talked a lot with chemical formulas because we are scientists, but I think chemical formulas are not of interest first for the public, and mostly they are regarded as scary, although we all are, we consist of chemistry. Even you can have water as a chemical formula, but we try to really give advice to consumers. So we say you can control your risk if you, for example, make toast and French fries not black but golden. And we know from risk perception research that people regard something as less risky if they can control the risk. And we also let our scientists talk and not only hide behind the scientific equipment. So there are a lot of interviews in our magazine. We also have interviews with other people, like last time we had a Nobel Prize winner even with regards to some aspects of genome editing. And we can also reuse our content in the magazine for social media and talk about possible risks, for example, of e-cigarettes on Twitter. And this is an infographic about glyphosate. Also controversial issues can be shown with graphics, and especially here we know that providing information is not enough, and we need to address the risk perception as well and take consumer concerns seriously. This is an example about the process, which is also at the end a part of the challenge. Because you start, of course, mostly you work with agencies and you receive kind of ideas, or you also develop ideas, but then to come to the final product, the final infographic, there you need to understand the content, and you need to say, okay, it's more important to address one topic and not the other topic. So it's not just giving data and facts to an agency and you receive something that you can publish. It's work. And it's also work with the visualization, but also to understand everything. This is also a process. This was our graphic on microplastics, and the idea was also to put some of the parts of the cover illustration in the article again, or use other illustrations in the article in the same style. This is an infographic on risk perception on e-cigarettes. Before it was just a graphic, just Excel graphic, and at the end we even had color, and we decided to also show, for example, that men tend to vape more than women, which we thought this is of interest. Because I think the gender ratio among smokers is normally balanced, but with e-cigarettes it's different. And this is our new issue. This is the English version, not published yet, but in German. This is the German version here. It's about e-cigarettes and possible risks about e-cigarettes. And you see also a special on coronavirus, because of course coronavirus is a topic. We thought it should be also in our issue. At the moment we are very busy with the question, can coronavirus be transmitted via food, which is very unlikely. Okay, then some feedback of the journal. We receive it from politics, from science, but also economy. Say that's a nice magazine and they like it, very interesting topics. They like especially the layout. And after we post them on Twitter, we have important stakeholders who follow us and who like and retweet the posts. For example, also members of the German Bundestag and media representatives, also the food safety agencies like the European Food Safety Agency or the Food Standard Agency in the UK. So challenges, if you want to change something. I think the first challenge is time, of course. we work in press and public relations. For example, today in the morning we talked about coronavirus on meat, which was a hot topic in Germany, and to still find the time to think strategically about a project that you need to have some more energy to do this. And of course, it was also quite important to convince people in our office, especially, for example, the heads of department, because they also have to also spend resources on our magazine, because of course we need to talk to our experts and need their time. So I gave a presentation at our management team in order to present this idea. And then also it was a challenge, just the brainstorming and even the name, because I thought at the beginning before to go, it means like to go, you throw it away afterwards, and it's so not something that you really throw away. And we thought about other names, and this was also quite a debate in our department and institute. And of course, capacity is an issue. Luckily, we then we could also had more people in my department, and still it's a lot of work. So of course, talking to our experts and talking to the agency. Still, we have the data and facts, the annual report, and we have the magazine with 2 issues per year. But in press and public relations, we have a lot of we are journalists, and so we also like to write. So everyone is involved also in my unit in this magazine with regard to specific topics. And of course, still, with regard to other topics as well, it's not easy always to be so comprehensive or to make texts understandable for lay people, because we are scientists and we need to be accurate. It shouldn't be wrong, of course, but still we try to simplify if possible. And also the time frame is a challenge at the moment. We select topics, and 6 months later there's the publication. For example, with regard to coronavirus, we had to add another article because it had to be in the magazine. I still like to talk about the facts and data shortly, because it's still our kind of annual report, only very compact. And we also visualize figures here, for example, the personnel, the number of scientists that work in our institution. We also visualize the budget and the expenditure. And we will now add our year in numbers so that you can have everything at a glance. So these are just the data and facts, and not the magazine. Yeah, and this is your publication, which of course it's an annual management report. It's aimed, probably you're more aware about your target audience. It's not aimed probably at the consumer as our magazine does, but probably you think probably about your communication strategy and your purpose and your key messages. So I'm not so into your publication, so I do not know whether you really want a revolution or an evolution or some changes. So I can only give you some ideas, and of course it's your decision, and you need to decide whether this is really a good idea or maybe not. For example, you have a forward, chair of the management committee, and in our BFR2Go, for example, we really address the readers with "Dear Readers." So this might be just nicer to say "Dear Readers," and not forward. And you can add also a portrait photo, and maybe also shorten the text. And then you can think about changing the executive summary. I mean, it's very impressive to read all your achievements, and some achievements might be interesting to address them in an interview. So, of course, you need to decide who could be the one who gives the interview and what this person really says, but you could also explain how you work and also your mission and for example, give an interview and say, so we provide the publishing services and our mission is openness and transparency, and explain your main achievements of the year in an interview. And I work in press and public relations, and still I work so much with language. I'm not a native speaker, I'm very sorry, I hope you can follow me. And in German, we try to simplify our language as if it's possible. So I just took one sentence of your report. It is, I read it to you now. Interinstitutional cooperation to achieve greater interoperability in the EU institutions through the use of common standards for the structuring of content and the exchange of information continued under the guidance of the Interinstitutional Metadata and Formats Committee. And I was just thinking, I know this is really provocative, probably not fitting into your whole communication strategy, but just to have a sidestep, might be something to say like, we continue to work closely with other EU institutions to exchange information efficiently and to make it available to people. And we develop standards for structuring content and sharing information. So maybe this is also something you can add a picture, if this is your target audience, by the way, and also simplify the language. Because we know also from risk perception research that if you say something simple, the chances that you are trusted are higher. I think if you want to be understood, this is also realized by the others. And a possibility also to visualize your strategy might be if you explain your workflows of the publication office with graphics, or show your most important projects or topics in an illustration. And these are, for example, an idea how to show your publications, because your publications are really attractive, and you might just add some pictures of these in the annual report. So this is a summary about food for thought. The language again, you can use target group specific wording, you can use more color and a more attractive typo. But we also have to accept, and we accepted it, that some data and facts are just data and facts. So it's probably mostly a decision what is worth to be visualized and what is still maybe just data and facts. So to select the interesting content to visualize is an idea. You can add interviews, for example, based on the executive summary, work with photos, graphics, forward with a photo. You could have our year in numbers. Then the mission statement is the slogan of the office, can be given a more prominent layout. And you can pick out impressive key figures, or maybe also use the budget with a graphic. But this is, of course, something you need to decide. This is the end of the presentation. This is the team at the International Green Week. It feels like ages ago, where we all sit together so closely. So I would really like to be in Luxembourg now, but I'm not. And maybe the times will change. But at the moment, we can say only hello from Berlin. And thank you for your attention, and I'm really happy to answer your questions.
Beatriz, you're muted.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Susan. I think we can relate very, very well to what you just presented us, because we are colleagues from the different agencies, institutions, and bodies, and we have reports to communicate achievements to the general public, so we can all relate to what you just presented to us. I would like to introduce some of the questions that we have in the chat. I've seen some very interesting questions. Some of them have been answered by a colleague of yours, but I think maybe if you could elaborate a little bit more. Let me see, because this keeps moving. Someone was asking if the link was available online, and that has already been replied. For the content selection, would it be safe to say that you rely a lot on surveys where you, from your capture perceptions? And would you be able to reach the same result without this input, without the perceptions from the users?
I think the first question, yes, we rely a lot on surveys. We also work with external agencies, and we have, for example, telephone interviews. If you ask 1,000 people in Germany about, for example, coronavirus in food, and this is important for our risk perception research. And the second question, yes, we could do it, but we are probably better if we know more about the perception. Because that's why we only knew about the microplastic topics, that it was so highly ranked in the German population that we gave it the cover story in our magazine. And also that we know about, for example, fears in plant protection products, that gives us the opportunity not only to provide facts and figures, but also to think more about how to communicate especially sensitive topics.
Thank you. We have a question from a colleague in DigiGrow who are using external contractors. Let me see, because this keeps jumping. We use external contractors for communication. If I understand it correctly, you have an internal team. How do you ensure that you have talented designers, and how can you turn these into a procurement practice?
So we work with an internal team, but we also work with contractors, and we choose these contractors, like probably also you have to do this via a process, and we also we have criteria that the contractor has to fulfill, but also we want to see examples before we have a contract. We ask for, please could you visualize some of these things we have, like text and data, and then we can compare the illustrations and see what really fits to our institutions. This might be different from institution to institution.
I see. We got another question on the private chat. You mentioned how you changed the report into something more dynamic using visuals. What has been the impact of the new report on user engagement? Have you been able to measure any impact, any benefits in the way that you engage with users thanks to the change in the layout?
Yes, it's different because when we had the annual report, it was more about sending the annual report to our target audience, and now we have really subscribers that subscribe to our magazine. And we have an evaluation, a really big evaluation every 4 years with regard to our formats, so we are still waiting for this big evaluation. But we can say now already that we have, of course, more subscribers to our magazine than to our annual report. So the engagement with the user is quite high. And also, as we use the content and the pictures for the social media, we receive a lot of feedback on social media as well. Does this answer your question?
I think so. It's also about yes, engagement and reactions by users on social media. We have, I think, a very interesting question on change management. You mentioned one of the challenges was trying to convince the heads of the department, because of course this required some capacity and it took time. And we have questioned specifically in this line. In our institution, it is very difficult to establish a visual culture, despite the fact that we all live in a visual world. Everyone is using infographics and DataViz, but when it comes to assign resources to it, we discover the importance that senior management gives to the translation of scientific outputs into visual. So the question is, what would you advise? How could you tackle this new culture of looking at this like a new artistic experiment? So how did you tackle the fact that senior management or you had to convince them?
So first, we also give training to our senior management and also our scientists with regard to press and public relations, so that we can give them some practical aspects how to communicate to the public, which at least gives them at the beginning a feeling that it's really important to change the language with regard to press, media, and consumers. That so we have like nearly 100 people every year where we give a media training. So we have the direct contact to all the people, so to a lot of people in our office, and to talk about how to be really comprehensive. And I think it's also very good to show other examples, how what you do at the moment. These are best practice examples. So I, for example, said also after this, look, there's even EU DataViz. It's such an important topic to visualize data, and as we are scientific institutions, we can also give information from the scientific literature, where we can say, okay, if you visualize something, then it can increase trust. And we can also see this in the scientific literature. So this is some argument that can help, because trust is, everyone wants to be trusted, and if you can increase trust just by visualization, that might be something to think of.
Have you been able to measure this trust, this increased trust, after almost 2 years or 1 year and a half?
I think no, not in
yet.
this, not yet. And
Yeah.
I don't know whether if we measure trust with regard to food safety, which we do, if this is really related to our publication, it would be nice. But there's so many other players that I think we are probably not the only one talking about food safety in Germany and Europe and the world. But of course, we ask every half a year, do you trust in German authorities with regard to food safety? And this is, but to say this is related to our publication, I mean, this would be would be nice, but no, sorry, I can't do this at the moment.
Difficult to make.
Scientific.
The correlation, yes.
Yeah.
We have another question on the time it takes to review a standard document, for example, of 50 pages, and turn it into a visual document. I don't know if this is easy to estimate just by the number of pages of textual.
I think this is very difficult to say. I mean, we could say we take, if you work with an agency, then it's probably faster, but it really depends on the content, how much time it takes. I can only say that we need at least one person in the press office, and even more, like people who work also on the text, of course, to create this magazine.
There is another question on the online magazine. Do you somehow link the graphics presented with the raw data behind, so that people can directly download sorry, this keeps moving because then we have someone replying in the chat, which is great. Someone from your team is very active. That's
okay.
But then
direct access to the data, yes. Beatrice.
Direct access to the data. Thank you, Maria.
Yes, in the magazine, in the print and the online version, we have a link to all the data behind. So every article at the end has a link to the, for example, the scientific opinion or the frequently asked question we have on our website.
Okay. I'm trying to jump back and forth to the chat. I have a question. We have a question on the people in the team. how many people in your team are working on each magazine on average? And which are the profiles and skills you recommend to have in-house and what can be externalized? Because you mentioned that you were working with an agency.
Yeah, I mean, the whole graphic, the layout, this can be done by, I think, an external agency. Of course, if you have the capacity and the money to have this internal, might be also a solution. But for us, it works better to get new ideas with external agencies. But still, we need to understand our department, how the agency works, how do they function, what are the new trends, and I think also it's very important to really understand. Again, I say it again, the content. So we need people that are journalists, from my point of view, who or other have a scientific background, but understand our content. So that's why our whole team is also working on BFR to go. So we have two people working mostly on coordinating the process, also talking to the external agency. But the whole team, we work in press and public relations, so we are quite close to our scientists. So we talk then to the scientists to develop also the ideas for the infographics. So it's about the people in house who know how the agency work, but who also understand the content. But this, of course, depends also on the publication and target audiences you have as well.
On a case by case, I suppose. Yes, you give estimates and average, but again, it has to be on the content and the specialized people working on it. What was the biggest challenge when you did the magazine for the first time?
Biggest challenge for the first time? I think selecting really the external agency to work with, because we knew that if you have a good agency, then probably it's easier to develop a layout which is also regarded as appropriate from our internal perspective, because we also have to manage our expectations, not only external but also in-house. And for us, it was a great step for a scientific organization which really also likes tags, likes to be very, likes tables, likes science, which I think is nice. But sometimes people think that visualization is too easy and simplifies science in a way that is not appropriate. And so our challenge was to be, to visualize things that people like it, but still also like it in-house with regard to the science aspects.
And are you still working with the same agency now, almost 2 years later?
Yes, we do at the moment, yes.
And I suppose that the process and the cooperation working together has become easier as they really understand your expectations and they know better what's the institute, etc. No?
Yes, that's true. But I think for every topic, it's still another infographic. It's a new topic, and still you need. I think if you talk about animal testing, and the next time you talk about heat-induced contaminants, it's still important that you know about it. Of course, the processes are easier after time, but with regard to thinking about the content, it will still be the same if there are new topics. And there will be new topics, because it should be a new magazine every 6 months.
We have a question about the cost. How much does it cost to produce the annual report and the 2 magazines per year? Mm-hmm. I also saw a printed copy earlier. What is the order of print runs? Mm-hmm. So we have paper copies. Yeah,
it's more than 20,000 euros per issue for the BFR to go. It doesn't include the resources in our unit, but the external costs, and we have like 4,000 copies roughly. and of course the online version as well. And for the annual report, we are at the moment in the process, because it's too expensive, because we still print the facts and data, and I think we have the BFR to go. We don't need to print the facts and data, so we will reduce this hopefully to just an online version, so that we do not have any costs with regard to printing, with regard to the annual report.
We have a question on responsiveness. How is it with the responsive design? Can the magazine also be shown on a tablet or a mobile phone?
At the moment, we are working on a microsite of the BFR to go. So this is our new project, and this, of course, will be responsive.
A question on the choosing of the content. No, okay, this is a reply. Let me see, because thank you very much. A colleague is replying to all the questions here, so I'm trying to get through and make sure that I don't miss any of the good questions coming up. So just bear with me for 1 second. There's another question about the choosing of the content and how the projects and the topics are selected. The biggest challenge. Let me see, I'm moving up in the chat. There is a question, I think you've already covered this one, but it's from a different angle. Would it be possible to measure the increased attractiveness of the new publication? You talked about user engagement, how it has risen, the effect and the reactions in social media, but do you have any measure? Do you have any survey where you can measure satisfaction?
We have a survey every 4 years, which is a really stakeholder survey. And we ask also about the different formats. We also have, for example, apps, and we also ask with regard to social media. But this is only every 4 years. So hopefully next time we will also evaluate BFR to go.
Suzan, we have another question about the process. The colleague is asking, I'd like to know more about the workflow. And I lost it again. Let me see. About the workflow between the graphics team, between the authors and the designers. How do you choose the content that should be visualized? Do the designers offer input?
So the authors of the articles are the people working in my group. These are not for example, the scientists. So the scientists do not talk to the agency. It's just the people in my group. And we have a meeting in our group, and we talk about the topics which are of interest, for example, because of the surveys we have, or because we receive press requests, or even citizens that come to us and ask questions. And we sit together like 12 people, and we decide on topics that we suggest to our head of departments. And for example, we say that, okay, what do you think about microplastics for the next issue? And then head of department said, okay, if you say this is a topic, then just do it. Or maybe he says, oh no, not again microplastics, and then we discuss it. So we suggest the topic, and we talk also to the external agency, and we talk to our scientists.
I'm sorry if I may intervene. It's just because my question was about the content to be visualized. So not so much about the topic, but when you've decided on the topic, you've decided on the content, because you were mentioning earlier that maybe choosing the most interesting data to dedicate a visual to in a space. And how do you choose that? Do you discuss it with the designers?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this is the discussion with the designer. And also the authors of so the people in my team might also have an idea already, also talking with the scientists, and this is then a process with the designer. Yes.
There is a comment from Darian McGarry. He's the community manager for the community of practice in data visualization. And maybe this is for internal, but because of the interest in this subject, I use the floor to say that we could be launching a subgroup on this topic, because we see by the questions and the comments that this is a very hot topic. So just I close the brackets. This is internal for us, for EU people working on data visualization. There is a question about, you mentioned the agency. Could you share with us the name of the agency?
Yes, I already did with Simon. So.
Okay, then we will ask Simon, and if you can share it here with the group so that everyone knows.
I think that's fine.
Okay.
It's also in the, by the way, it's also mentioned, I think, in BFR to go. So it's also included in
the issues.
It's not really a secret.
Okay. Great. Okay. I would like to invite participants. If you see that I haven't raised the issue that you put in the chat box, please unmute yourself and feel free to ask Suzan directly. I'm just filtering through the comments and the chat box, which is very active, to make sure that we didn't leave anything behind. But please take the floor, like Anka did. Just unmute yourself and please raise your question. We have a comment. Thank you for a fantastic presentation. I fully agree with the colleague. It resonates very much with our work.
Ich melde mich gleich. Ich bin noch in der EU.
I see you're being called to another meeting.
Sorry.
Link to the magazine. Are the graphic elements reusable? The graphic elements, the visual you use, I suppose you try to reuse them.
Yes, we use them for social media, for other publications. Yes, of course.
Mm-hmm. There's a question about the language, and because, of course, we are EU and multilingualism, why do you translate them into English? Is it to reach out to people outside Germany? Do you have users in the rest of the world?
Yes, we do. And it's also our strategy to internationalize, because especially in food safety, we realize that food safety is not only a national aspect, because it is it's a global safety issues, and especially science organizations work very closely together in order to also communicate to the public. For example, we have a communication expert network also with the European Food Safety Agency, and so we try also to internationalize our strategy. Of course, like you see now, coronavirus in food is a topic for not only Germany, and also with other crises like EHEC, E. coli in food. This was also very international. So yes, we also try not only to inform Germany, but also around the world. If they are interested.
And a further detail on this aspect, how could you elaborate on the translation policy? Do you disseminate at the same time the German and the English version, or is there some time lapse in between?
There's a time lapse between, and this is already the German version. The English version is still in the pipeline, and this is also a process, as you can imagine. At the moment, we work with a translation agency, but we do all the quality assurance in-house. And of course, with other texts, we say the German version is the, let's say, legal binding version, but the English version still needs to be quality assured by press department, and also sometimes with our scientists. So there is a time gap between them.
Yes, I saw Lena here was saying roughly 2 weeks between between both language versions. Another one about the subscription of the newsletter, which you already mentioned, that you send them to the members who subscribe to your newsletter. Thank you. A fantastic presentation again. So very much appreciated. An order. Okay, readers can order the magazine online. Do you receive specifications from the agency for the number of characters to keep a consistency in the layout?
The number of characters means the number of...
I would like to ask Angel Alvarez to elaborate a little bit more on his question for the content.
The content. We developed first the concept, and we said we need so many pages. And of course, if we have more, we need to think about. So we tell our authors, which are the people mostly in our group, how many characters they have. So we try to stick to this, and we decide at the beginning if it's such an interesting topic that we need like 2 pages or 4 pages even, or if it's okay to stick to just 1 page, or just put it as we also have a very, we call this spectrum. So this is just very short message, but we first developed the concept, not the agency, but of course the agency gives us advice if we think, okay, it's maybe it's a little bit more, maybe we can have a picture, how can we do this that it still fits into our publication.
Thank you. There are two, there's one question on risk. Is there a risk in oversimplifying your message when using graphics over text, and how do you manage it?
Yes, I think there is a risk to oversimplify, especially if your target audience are scientists, because they want sometimes some want to have it complicated. I don't know, and mostly the risk is about the perception, not really about the content. So they are not really like. I think the danger is not really that it's not. Scientists, they have the fear that the science get lost if there are too many pictures. This is more an internal communication than external.
I think this links to perception that it's too simplistic using visuals and convincing some people inside.
And of course, we know also that visualization can polarize more. So this is also from scientific literature that we know that if you use visualization, it can polarize. For example, this is a totally different topic with regard to refugee policy. I know about studies that if you visualize it, people are more polarized than if you just talk about it.
Thank you for that. There is a question about the persistent identifier. Do you use any identification system for your infographics?
No, not for the infographics, but good idea.
Good. A bit more technical, I see you are using e-paper to publish the magazine online. Do you need to prepare it for this format, or do you prepare it only in PDF?
At the moment, PDF and e-paper, but we want to have the microsite. We want to really have a magazine microsite. And we already had a kick-off workshop, and so it will be also online, have a totally new look. At the moment, it's mostly PDF. The e-paper version, I don't know whether we still have it. Some people still like it, but I think it's a trend that decreases even. And so we really want to have a magazine website.
We have 2 more, and I think with that we will let you go, Suzan, because it has been very, very, very dynamic and very intense. We have a question about the target audience. Are universities and educational sector among your target audience?
Yes.
These formats work for them, or do you have other tools?
This is one of the most, the tool to especially address universities, especially address students, and we even created a concept to really target universities with these issues.
There is a question about the data, but I'm not sure if I understand it right. with the new situation, to go more interactive and paperless, do you think that we need to be more interactive also in the data presentation to animate and digitalize them? Do you do this kind of publication?
I presented the consumer monitor where we measure the risk perception, and we now want to have an animated illustration so that you can also compare the topics with the different years or the age of the publication of the population. So this is also in the pipeline at the moment to work with animated illustrations. But I've also seen a lot of animated illustrations that I think they are nice to click, and it really depends on if there's more value in it. It really depends on the content. I have seen a lot of animated infographics where you just start and then you don't really know what is really the information about it. Is it just colorful and nice, or is there really content behind? And we still need content behind. It's not only about pictures, but about the issues. If we will really have to say something.
Absolutely, it's not just about the visuals, but having content behind.
Yes.
So I think with that, I would really like to say a big thank you on behalf of the Publications Office of the European Union and on behalf of all the colleagues that have joined us today. Thank you so much, Suzan. For all the participants, thanks for joining in. We are going to send the link to the recording, and we are also going to share the slides to Suzan's presentation. You will get them via EU Learn. And with this, I'd like to say thank you so much. Have a great weekend, and we will resume the webinars at the end of summer, after the summer in September.